Hi everyone, it's a Thursday. I'm in my Derivco t-shirt and pants for a change. We're talking tech, and we're really talking tech this time. Let's forget about the last one. So it must be a Tech Thursday. I'm Lee Naidu. I'm part of the branding and communications team, and today I'm your host. It's reboot week here at Derivco, so hope you guys are logging your hours. For those who don't know, reboot is dedicated time, 30% of every month given to each and every Derivcan to upskill, reduce technical debt, improve systems, and learn. And if Derivcans are behind on their reboot hours, I'm sure you can log a few after today's session because we're going to be learning. We're going to be learning about GitHub, and it's presented by none other than Gordon Beeming, senior developer here at Derivco. He's no stranger to the digital event roster, having presented at many webinars and events like these. He's also a vat of useless yet interesting info, sometimes comical, and I'm sure he will drop a pillow to during his talk today. But to keep you in the loop on how this session is going to flow, let's have a look at today's agenda. First up, to officially open the event, we have Adrian Rai, DevOps Service Owner at Derivco. Gordon will then deliver his talk titled Revolutionize How You Develop Software with GitHub, which should run for about an hour, followed by a Q&A session. We then head back to Adrian to say a few words, and then it's back to me to wrap things up. Regarding questions, even though we have some time dedicated to it at the end, we want to keep the session as interactive as possible. So drop them into the Q&A tab to the top right of your screen, and Gordon will get to them when he gets a chance. I think that covers everything from my side. We hope you enjoyed today's session. Feel free to comment and share on social using the hashtag Derivco Tech Thursday. We are active on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember to follow us on our newly revamped Stack Overflow page. Enough from me. Let's get the ball rolling. I can see Adrian is amped and ready, maybe a little nervous. It's his first time on Tech Thursday. So let's give him a virtual round of applause. Over to you, Adrian.
Tech Thursdays and DevOps. Wow, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me here today, Lee. And hi to everyone that's joined us. I'm Adrian Rai, the DevOps Service Owner within Internal Operations and Tech Inc. at Derivco. As part of DevOps at Derivco, it's vital that we keep our eyes on the ever-changing and evolving global DevOps product ecosystem. Why do we do this? We do this to ensure we remain competitive in the industry by adopting the products which bring the most value to our organization. In 2018, Microsoft acquired GitHub, and the ecosystem evolution continued once again. Exciting times indeed, and we are currently involved in R&D with Microsoft and GitHub to evaluate any benefits or challenges from the solutions on offer. It's at this point where I would like to introduce and then hand over to Gordon Beeming, a fellow Derivcan. Gordon is well known at Derivco for being a passionate speaker on adding value whilst using continuous improvement. Gordon is a father, husband, triathlete competitor, Microsoft MVP, and DevOps evangelist, who is part of the team leading the charge on such R&D initiatives at Derivco. Gordon will take you through some of the latest project planning tools released only yesterday, as well as some of the remote development experiences that can be facilitated in GitHub today. Without further ado, over to you, Gordon.
Awesome. Thanks for the intro, guys. So as mentioned, my name's Gordon. I speak on stuff. A quick one before we get started on the interesting facts. And I'm pretty sure everyone that's not Derivco might know this already, right? So the reason everyone says I do interesting facts, and it wasn't for the reason that I intended it actually. So my son had started off by asking what's the difference between the color of eggs. So I did a quick Google, as you do. That's the only way as a parent you sound smart to your kids. You share them reams of information off Google. And from that, I discovered that, well, the difference is basically by the color of the chicken and something that's linked to their earlobes. So I shared that piece of information with everyone, thinking, oh, everyone now knows what the difference is between the colors, the chicken eggs. And out of that came reams of what? Chickens have earlobes. So yeah, it's not sort of the fame, not for the reason you intended, but I guess that's sort of how that works. So let's dive in. So Adrian already covered much of who I am. The only thing I'll add to that is that If you go to the URL in the bottom left-hand corner of my slides there, you can get to my profile page where you'll be able to connect with me on various social medias. And then I'll jump in. Thought before we start, some great tips for a greater life. Stuff that you'll probably have heard a lot about, or at least if you are trying to continuously improve how you do things, you would have most likely had one or more of these conversations in the last 6 to 12 months, which is switch to containers. Use the cloud. Everyone knows everything's better with some cloud, right? Minimize context switching, reduce meetings, and increase flow time. The problem with all of these for me, though, is that we continuously talk about it. We don't really do anything new or, as the title would suggest, revolutionary. So let's jump back to that title then. It had the word revolutionize in it. If we take a look at a definition for that, it says to change something radically or fundamentally. For me, that means that we need to have a complete mind shift change to how we approach a problem. It isn't enough these days to just be Googling what other people are doing and trying to do the same thing. We have to realize that we aren't other companies. We aren't a Netflix. We aren't a Google. We aren't an Amazon. We need to take things that are out there in the industry and figure out how to best use them for ourselves to make our business thrive. The other word that's sort of closely linked to this for me is the word insanity. And back to the other point, was doing the same thing over and over and over again. We're not going to get different results if we continue that way. So what's planned for today? We'll start off talking about some planning tools that, as Adrian mentioned, GitHub announced yesterday evening. So this is super hot off the press. I've been playing with it for the last couple of weeks. I absolutely love it. I almost thought that today was Wednesday, which is a funny side tip, side bit of information there. The launch was moved slightly out, and I was hoping I wouldn't have to go to the PM asking for a special, can I get like a 3-hour window to sort of release something before it goes live. But luckily, when I got some sleep, I realized that I was talking on Thursday for a Tech Thursday and not Wednesday. So yeah, around planning, so back to the topic, I do the whole squirrel thing quite a lot, as if anyone's watched my talks, they would know. Around planning, we're always trying to get like quite a lot out of our planning tools. And sometimes we have to ask ourselves, well, what are we putting into them? The other thing that we're going to talk about is remote development, and not the sort of type that's work from home COVID remote development, but more looking at bringing containers more towards your dev space. Many of you will be familiar with the term cattle, not pets, when we talk about production environments. And that's the idea that we would want to be able to pull a machine out of production and reconfigure that using infrastructure as code and similar tools without any human intervention, so we don't have snowflake setups in production. The problem is our development environment is probably the biggest snowflake that we have. And if you're doing business properly, it's probably also the only place that your software is changing. So why is this snowflake acceptable? Well, let's move on then into planning. So do you remember the times where we had physical boards? I think I do. One of the great things for me about that is we would stand around that physical board, moving our sticky notes, as you can see the guy there writing on his sticky note. And if something didn't feel right with the way we did stuff, we changed it there and then as a team. We said, okay, we're going to stick this one on this place. We're going to draw a little circle on the top of the board, and we're going to go and say, well, this is now where we're going to put priority items because our board sort of doesn't cater it. And we're very autonomous with the way that we worked. Our world, when we moved digital, moved into a very structured manner where the tools dictated how our teams worked. I think we need to focus a little bit more about how we work and allow the tools to facilitate that process. And so that reason that I love the way that GitHub projects, that, like I mentioned, was released yesterday. It's currently in a closed access beta. So you can go to the GitHub site and request access to that. But for me, the tool is amazing because it gives you a experience that's pretty much like Excel. So you start off by being in a grid and you type your ideas. You then attach other metadata to that as you would. So if you decide like you want to put that priority column, like I said earlier, you're just going to add a priority column. If you decide that you want to capture small, medium, and large effort, you go and do that. And there's nothing that gets in your way or stops you from doing what you need to do to be able to plan your projects effectively. And there's a lot more coming to this product. As I said, it's in a closed beta at the moment. As this continues to roll out, you'll see a lot more amazing stuff coming from the team. So let's dive into a demo, shall we? So we're going to start off on our organization homepage. And from there, we're going to head over to the projects tab. And from here, you can see I've sort of got the beta projects node and the old projects node. I've got 4 closed projects, but don't worry about those. We don't need those at the moment. So when we start a new project, your getting started experience just gives you a little bit of information about how you can use the tool. But for now, we're going to skip over that stuff and go straight into setting what our project name is. So we're going to call our project Derivco Tech Thursday webinar, keyboard tapping. And then I'm going to go over to statuses, and I don't really like the status to do. So I'm going to go and make the first status approved and then go and save this. Now I'm going to head over to back to the view, and because there's still a little bit of me that likes Azure DevOps, I'm going to go and change the first view to the backlog. I'm going to create a new view, rename this one to the board, and then I'm going to go change the way this lays out to actually show me a board. And then before I save this, I'm actually going to add another status here. So I'm just going to call this one extended review, because there's some items that I'm going to have to put into this status. And for me, that sort of lives before that done column. So I'm going to go ahead and save this now. Okay, so head over to the backlog again. And I'm just going to go and create some what's called draft issues. So at this point, they're not linked to any repo. They're just going to sit there as issues, stuff that's on my mind right now that we need to do for the project. So instead of me losing context of that and going somewhere else, I could just capture that in place right here. And then because I do have some actual work that I know about that exists in a repo, I'm going to connect to this fictional Octa pancake project. I'm going to add 3 issues that I have there. And then you'll also see this pull request, which for this project specifically is critical. So I'm going to add that pull request in as well. Next up, I'm going to add some of the fields that you should be familiar with if you've used GitHub issues. So we're going to add the labels and milestones in here. I'm going to save those changes quickly. And then we want to set some of this data for our project. So we're going to set some of these to extended review. Go set this one to approved. And then the keyboard support in projects is probably the best I've seen in any other product. So once you play with it, you'll see how easily this works. At the moment, I'm just using my arrow key and enter, jumping around, setting the data for different fields. So we'll go set this one to enhancements, go set some milestones up. But then I mentioned earlier as well that you can just add extra stuff when you want, right? So right now, I just want to go add a new column called effort. And I want to make this be a single select. And I'll go and say, well, we've got a small, medium, and a large size for the way we do effort in our team. Then I'll go through and just assign these various effort values. There's small. This one can be medium. And the pull request can be large. Well, the pull request. Okay, we'll do that one as large. Yeah. Leave it. And as I mentioned earlier, this is my canvas, right? I can do what I want. So I can take that effort column that was created last and I'll just move it inline because that's something that I care more about in this case. So I go ahead and save that. Then I jump across to my board and you can see my data looks exactly as you would expect it to work. everything's in the right status columns based with the statuses that are set. That pull request I didn't move earlier, so I'll go and move that to extended review quickly. And you can see from the backlog that obviously then ties up together because this is one product and it just works. Now, because we added effort, and effort's quite important to me, I'm just going to go and add another view quickly. I'm going to call this one by effort. And for this view, I want to show all my work grouped by effort. So I'm going to add the effort column, and then I'm going to group by that value. So you can see now all my work is grouped by the small, medium, large, and then the no effort, which is obviously everything that's not assigned. And I mentioned there's great keyboard support, so let's try one of those. So if I press Control-K, new view, I want to show the milestones because it's going to be my sort of release view of what we're planning on releasing. I'm going to filter this by releases. I want to do July, but I don't see that, so I'll just use August. And then because this is just text, I can change that to the 7th. And then, oh wait, I'm not going to use mouse, sorry, habits. Again, Control-S, save view, and then we'll just save that. Now, because we obviously want to see data there, otherwise, who knows if this is really working, we'll go ahead and just set some milestones. This view doesn't have that, so I'll just jump back to the backlog instead of adding it there. So I'll go change the milestone for this issue and say that this is actually in July. That issue can also be July. And then we'll set this PR also to be July. If we switch back to this view, you can see that those issues and PRs now show up. And then if I go and say, actually, this issue we're not doing anymore, you can see in the bottom left-hand corner there, it gives us a message just to say, hey, something that you've just changed now makes it fall outside of that filter, and therefore it's lost. Well, not lost, but it's out of the view. If we go over to the issue screen that you might be familiar with, you can see we've got projects on the side. And from here, we could change the efforts if we wanted to, or the status. Okay. So right at the end there, I showed a little bit of issues. The next thing I'm going to do is dive more into issues. So again, this was the issues V2 was released yesterday on an open beta to all public projects. So currently, if you have a private project, you might not see this unless you have funny access, or should I say special access. Previously, issues, although they were powerful, if you sort of knew how to tweak and mangle the options available to you in GitHub, which was largely driven by labels, you're able to do a lot with it. With the release yesterday, this became a lot easier and a lot more intuitive for teams to use, especially when you link that to the project's context. So let's take a look and see what that looks like, shall we? So I'm starting here on the issues tab or page. I'm just going to create a new idea. Let's give this idea title. So we're going to go ahead and build an epic feature. From my template, it already has a description and a task section. So I'm going to go add a quick description here, build platform's best feature yet. And then we want to go and add some tasks for that. So with most work, I guess we should plan it. We want to write code because that'll be pretty useful, I guess. And then we're going to release stuff to customers. And that's it. You'll see also, after we save this, you'll see on the top there that this currently has the label of idea. And that's something else that was pulled through from our template. So that kind of stuff has been available before, but not something that's widely used on the platform at the moment. So we can see we've got our task list there. And on the right-hand side, you can see a new button that shows up that says convert to issue. So on the right code, I'm just going to click that one because it's the one I think I might know more about. But this title write code doesn't really mean anything. If anyone else in our team sees this, they won't have context of what that means. So let's change that and change it to write code for the platform's best feature yet. Now, if someone sees this, they'll know exactly what I'm doing. And obviously, the reason I drilled into this is because I want to specify tasks at this level that I need to do. So I'm just going to go and hit the task list button to bring that up. And then yeah, the first thing we want to do is set up testing environment, because that's not automated yet. We then want to go and obviously write the actual code. After we've done that, we want to do some integration tests, because testing is important. And then we want to deploy our code. And some of you might be saying, but we've got released to customers in the previous issue. And yes, we do. Deploying code is very different to releasing code. The one's moving binaries away or around, and the other one is enabling value for customers. You can see at the top here, this shows that we are tracking this issue through another issue. So we'll go ahead and just click back to our previous issue. You can see here inline that text has updated, obviously, to reflect the issue. And it shows at the top that there is 3 tasks linked to this issue specifically. While we're here, let me just go and assign this to myself. We'll go add another label, because this is the platform's best feature. We're going to say this is an enhancement. From here, we might as well link that to the project that we created. We shouldn't have to go to another screen to do that, right? We'll say that this is currently in progress, and it's a large effort. And then lastly, we want to go set the milestone for this. Great stuff. So that's a little intro into what issues is. Well, the new issues v2. As I said, it is available for everyone if you do want to go and use it. Next up, we're going to chat about remote development. And this is the part that's really exciting for the future of what dev could look like. I was chatting to one of the guys in our team, Leroy, yesterday, and what he said, like, he loves about this as a feature, is that it really brings all the pains of what you would normally find, like when you get in other environments later down the pipeline, right? So when you're setting up your testing environment, when you're setting up your production environment, it's bringing all those pains of that integration and bring it all the way to your dev machine. So when we talk about the cost of bugs, and the earlier we find it, the cheaper it is. This is the earliest we could find an integration bug, is when we're setting up our dev environment now. And that kind of configuration should follow us the whole way through to production. So the first part we're going to talk about, because this is largely a talk around GitHub, is code spaces. For myself and potentially a lot of other people, my first introduction to dev containers is when Microsoft released code spaces a while back, and now obviously with GitHub code spaces. The idea, if you want to think about it loosely, is just a remote session of VS Code hosted on someone else's hardware, which is very, very beneficial to you if you only have your browser available to do some dev. You can connect to it directly from your local machine, and I'll show you a bit of that soon. So let's get started. We're going to start off and just go and create a new repo, so that hopefully it shows that there's no shenanigans. I am using a template, and that's just so that licenses drop, because open software and not having right licenses and legal, it's not fun. So we'll go and create that public, and then we'll just use that sort of default generated name for us. Now we're going to head over to the code button. You see I've got this option here to open with code spaces. I don't have an active code space for this because I've just created it. So I'll go and click create code space. So in the background, this is pulling GitHub's default image for code spaces. It has a lot of the stuff installed in it that you would normally need if you want to sort of get started with most environments. You've got your Python in there, Node.js, you've got Docker installed. And there's a link as you open it, which helps you then go, like if you want to see the full list of that, you can go over to that link over there and just see what everything that's installed out of the box, and also see how they configure that, which will help you then when you do your own configuration of a dev container. But inside this code space now, what I want to do is just go and make some changes, because this is VS Code. I know VS Code, right? So I'm going to start off, just going to change the title here. I'm going to call it Rotary Phone. because that's part of the lovely name that was given to me. I'm going to remove the links about community help pages, because this is obviously not that repo. And then I don't want the issue templates to be part of my repo. I'd rather inherit that from our community health repo. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete this quickly. As you might notice, while I'm busy working, some icons are showing up, some extensions are loading on the side, and that's because I'm signed into into Codespaces with my own GitHub account, and my GitHub settings are synced between all my VS Codes where I am signed in. So I was able to work, and while I'm working, it's busy installing all my stuff for me, which is great. So I'll just go back to the repo quickly. I just want to go and show you the issues. So at the moment, obviously, we have issues here. We're going to delete those templates, but those would obviously still stay. They'll stay there because of the community health repo. Sorry about that. So one of the things you'll see here, obviously you'll notice we haven't committed any code yet. But what we can do is go and export sort of the current state of our code from outside the container, and we'll create a new branch with that code. So it's only take a couple of seconds, but whether we've committed stuff locally or not, we'll get a snapshot of that. And if we look here on this branch, you can see the title there is updated as we'd expected, the community health links removed, and this change was made by Codespaces. So when we open it, it says there isn't a Codespace for this branch specifically, but we'll just connect back into our main branch. Take a couple of seconds quickly. Okay, then, and we're back in again. So then, quickly, I just wanted to point out that, so I mentioned there's a lot of stuff installed here for you, right? So, and I did also mention that one of those things is Docker. So just to prove that Docker is actually installed, I'm going to head to the command line and show you that in a bit. So I also mentioned, sorry, my head's all over the place with my clicking and the moving. I also mentioned that you can do this from VS Code on your local machine. So right now, this is me opening that on my local machine. If you look in the bottom right-hand corner, it says it's setting up a remote connection. So that's then connecting to my container that's hosted by GitHub. And again, at this point, I haven't committed any code. This is just living in that instance that's hosted for me. If I go to the README page, it's still got those same changes that were made to it. And over here, I can go and make changes. As long as I save this file, it will show up in the other side. So that's doing a live sync for you as those changes are made. So now from the web browser side, I'll go add something else. I didn't save that. Go back and save it so you can see something else comes here. And then lastly, I'll just make a last bit, and then I'll save that and close VS Code. And you can see that now exists in the version that's in the browser. So then again, because this is VS Code, I can go and commit that. But before I do it, I want to just point out that that branch that we created from an earlier state, like this isn't a live branch that's connected to the state of our image. So you see that extra text that I typed there, none of that exists in that side branch that we created. So I'm going to go add some comment, and always put emojis in your comments when people go through the history because they're having a bad day because there's bugs. Help them smile. Okay, and then we just going to jump back over to our admin there, and we'll just delete that code space. Cool. I didn't dive too much here into what Codespaces do. And the reason for that, because I'm doing a self punt because I can, because I have the mic at the moment, which is the great thing about being a speaker. Last month at our local user group, I did a talk specifically on code spaces. So if you want to learn more about that, we also did a live share from inside the CodeSpace environment that's hosted in GitHub with another user. Set up Azure Kubernetes cluster, set up that whole Docker environment locally in the CodeSpace, and played around with that stuff. So if you want to see more about that, there's a link that you can go and check that out. Then I mentioned obviously quite a bit now about dev containers, and it wouldn't help if I show you amazing stuff with dev containers, but I don't show you how to set one of those up by yourself. So what we're going to do now is just run through some of those basics of getting a dev container set up on your own source code. So we're going to open the same repo again, the same one that we've just made those other changes to. I'm going to go step by step what it means to make those changes. I like working inside VS Code just because some of the shortcut keys your browser tends to take over. So if you control tab between stuff, that's going to switch your browser tab. So if you're sitting in VS Code, then you won't have that as your experience. So it works a bit nicer. So the first thing we're going to need is that dev container JSON. So I'm just going to go create a dev container folder, dev container JSON file inside of it. And if you didn't know, in VS Code, if you just type a folder path with the folders and the file, it'll just create the folders for you leading up to that. And then we'll go and add a name because this is rotary phone. We're going to go and call this rotary phone. You'll see for some of the options, we do get full IntelliSense because this is a known schemed file. For the dev compose file, we're just going to step back one directory. Then we're going to go into a dev folder. And then we're going to create a Docker compose YAML file in there. So that's going to be the file that we're going to tell our dev container that it must run or use to compose our container by image. Then set the version. So this is version 3.7 is that we want to use to validate our file. The services that we want to define, we're just going to define a dev service for now. For the build, we're just going to set the context to this current directory. So anything around building this image, we're just going to place in this folder for now. And we're going to set a working directory for when our image is running. And we set that to /app. And then we're also going to need to create a volume for that. So we're just going to go and set the directory behind us, mapping to /app. So that when we open up the container, we get all the files that we'd expect to show up there. And then we need to run a command because typing lots and lots of stuff is tedious to watch. Just going to paste that in. But you'll notice there that we're running a init file. So I'm just going to create that init file. And then after that, we're sleeping indefinitely. And that's so that our container doesn't shut down when we actually want to do some dev inside of it. So we created the init PS1. We didn't put any information in it. We'll come back to that later, but rather create it now instead of our stuff breaking later. Then we have a Docker file. And for this, again, typing and watching typing takes forever. Ask the guys that watched me do SQL Saturday in Cape Town a couple of years ago. And for this, we're just going to do a .NET 5 SDK, very basic stuff. We're going to install PowerShell in there and then create a dev account, which we're going to be running as. I mentioned earlier that I'll show you that we are actually running in real Docker. I thought I'd leave it for now when we do the dev container, just so you can see it in the same motion. So there I ran the Docker command. It showed me the default Docker help, which hopefully is enough proof that we actually have it running here. But let's see. So you remember in the Docker compose file, we created a dev service. So we just need to tell our dev container that we want to use that dev service as a service that it needs to be running in. We're setting the workspace here so that it has that context as well. And then because this is VS Code, we want to specify what extensions we need to install. So I've just added a couple there which are quite handy just for dev in general. And then the last thing that we want to do here is just go and specify the shutdown action. We'll just set that to stop compose. Now that we've done that, we can go and rebuild our container. So we'll click rebuild. It'll give us a message saying that it's going to go and rebuild as you'd expect. So this goes away. It runs. So at the moment in the cloud, in GitHub, it's busy rebuilding that container for you. You see this experience looks slightly different to before, because now instead of there being image sitting and waiting for you, it's busy building this image on the fly. Now that it's built that, it's busy connecting back in. You see in the bottom right-hand corner then, it's again connecting back into our code space. And things will start lighting up again as we go. And then one of the last things we did before we left is type Docker, and you can see this fails. And the reason for that is that, as I pointed out earlier, we are inside now a .NET 5 SDK as our base image, and so we no longer have access to Docker. The next thing I want to do is, because this is not just your average Hello World demo, I want to add a database, because apparently no demos are complete until you've shown that you can do something with the database. So I'm going to go add a DB instance there quickly. It's going to use SQL 2019. And the problem with YAML is that it doesn't like copy and paste. I think it's a way for our industry to sort of try and make us understand what the hell we're doing, so we can't always just pull stuff off Stack Overflow. But because we're using SQL now, I'm going to go and just add the MS SQL extension and some basic settings that sort of defaults for MS SQL. One of the other things I'll do while we're here is just change the color of our theme. So we'll know that when we're running inside the container, it's going to be a white theme, which will probably make it easier for you guys to see what's on screen as well. And then I've got 2 SQL connections here. So when this container runs, because this is my dev environment, I don't want to each time have to reconfigure what I'm connecting to. Bear in mind that this is a container. It starts from scratch every time it gets rebuilt. So we need to bring all that context to it every time. At this point, we'll just go and fill in what that init.ps1 does. So I mentioned earlier that when we start the container, we're going to run this init ps1, but we had nothing in it yet. So now what we're going to do is we're going to install the SQL Server module, and that's going to allow us to run commands inside PowerShell. And all we're going to do at the moment is just go and create a database. And the reason that there's that while loop there is because as we start our execution, our init file gets run, and SQL won't be up at the same time that we start up. So we basically just keep on retrying until we can see that SQL's up, and we know that through that command actually running. Just rebuild the container quickly. You saw I had an error there. I think I know what it is. I mentioned the YAML files are weird, so I'll just cancel that quickly. Yeah, so I copied this from my other project had 4 spaces. So let me just switch this back to 2 spaces, because YAML files are terrible that way. It works off a convention. So if you start using double space, you have to always use double space. If you use 4 space, you always have to use 4 space. If you use tabs, you always have to use tabs. It's a nightmare and it's hard to debug. So I'll just go rebuild that quickly. So this should actually be working now. So you'll see it's connecting. Okay, I got an error. Maybe I should have read what that log said. So I'll read the log this time and just see what I did wrong. View creation log. So this is that same output that we saw before. It's just now like it's bringing that log for us into our container. Complaining about DB instance still. Oh, I indented everything back one, but I didn't move the service back a node as well. Okay, so now it should be right. So again, indentation, it sucks with YAML files. We should be good now. So if we go rebuild this container, this should work. At least I'm hoping it works. If it doesn't, I don't know what. It's gonna be one of those interesting things. It's gonna be more than the demo guard stepping up, I think. Looks like it's doing more, so that seems like it's going to be working. Cool, no errors. So we're going to let this connect quickly. Cool, then you can see it flicked into the Y theme. So that's it reading those container settings out of our dev container JSON. And if we head over to the bottom left here, to that SQL, or the MS SQL extension that we installed, you can see that it's loaded up our connections for us out of our settings. And if we look at the local instance or the local connection, you can see our database exists there. And then at the bottom here, we've also got local, but this one reads straight into our specific database. So we don't see any of the extra folders and stuff. It's just a bit cleaner for us to work if we're working with just like our database. So off that DB, again, it's all about trying to prove that there's no gimmicky things going on here. So I'm going to create a test table. I'm going to create an ID integer. It's not a null, more column. You can insert into there. Just add one value, and the value can be 1, might as well. And then we're going to select that data so that we can see it. And snippets, no, not snippet. Okay, let's type. Okay, select star from test. Okay, and then we'll just use Control-Shift-E to execute that. And we should get results. There we go. So that created our table, inserted some data, and selected that data. So you can see from this that we do have a real SQL instance. It's taking commands as you'd expect. So we can move on now. Before we do that, because I'm about to add some more code here, and if you don't have a git ignore, that makes your life painful. So we'll just do a .NET new git ignore. Again, because we're in that .NET 5 image, we're able to use that full SDK. Go open the container again quickly. And so the reason I'm hopping around the whole time is just to show that there's not sort of limitations, or at least I haven't seen many limitations in the way this can be used. So you can hop between the whole time. Your session's always there. It's basically just a connection into the session, and you're back to the state where you were. So I'm going to create a source folder, change into that source folder, and then I'm just going to do a .NET new MVC. So this will create us an MVC project, and then we're going to go and say .NET run should build our code and then run it for us. So at the moment, that's running in an image sitting most likely in an Azure data center. And we sitting here in South Africa. And because I'm cool, and this is why you don't touch your keyboard, guys. This last part is, I skipped over a last part. No. There's someone right now, I'm just letting everyone know that is very, very nervous backstage. Very, very nervous. You know who I'm talking about. Let's go back, just a little rewind, right? So we were, I want to show you there, just so you can see that there's no other trickery. It wasn't trickery on purpose, should I say. Because of the connection in the rebuild, that part was made this way. Hands off the keyboard. Cool, so this exposed the port for us. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go connect to that. So if you have done a .NET new of MVC and you run it, you know it'll expose 2 ports by default, 5000 and 5001. So we'll go run this 5001 port. And that should proxy through for us into our image and connect perfectly fine. So this is that sample app. If you're worried about the security of this, if I go run this in the incognito window, you can see that it asks me for my GitHub credentials, and that's because that connection is secured by the fact that I am myself in this container. If I go to the 5000 port though, because again, the way that default sample project is set up, it's going to redirect onto the HTTPS port, which is 5001. And obviously that's not been hosted locally on my desktop machine. Okay. Now back to the keyboard. So that was the basics. That was the hello world, getting started, great stuff. Let's move on to something that's slightly more than that. This is not super advanced, but it will show you some of the power of what you can do with a dev container. For this, I'm also going to be using GitHub packages, which is something that GitHub made generally available on Monday this week. And basically what this demo is going to do is it's going to show you what a sort of dev experience could look like for a SQL dev. So it's going to have task setups that you can publish using SQL package from a database project inside the container. We're going to then package our SQL Server 2019 image with our database project in it. And then as well as the SQL tools that will allow us to deploy that when we restore the image. Let's take a quick look at what that looks like. Again, we're starting from our org page, and this time we're going to jump into this other solution that I have here, or repo called Solid Trouble. I think that's how you would say it. Trouble connects in there. And this one, we're not going to change much code. We're just going to be seeing what's there. Although to prove that everything is that actually works up and connects for real, we will do some code. So again, we'll switch to VS Code. The setup of this project is pretty much the same as what we've just set up. It's just got some little bit extras added to it. So if we go to our Docker Compose, you can see we're already using the package that's published from this same solution. And then if we go to our Docker file, you can see right at the end, we just added a little bit extra that's going to pull the SQL package tools into our image so that when our container is being rebuilt, we have access to that. We're going to try as much as possible not pull down live code or live files and binaries into your package at the time that you're rebuilding it. You sort of want that image to represent a certain state of your product. If we look at the init SQL, just got some scripts there to insert some sample data. Init PS1 at the end, we've added a build local publish and then executes of that init SQL that I showed you. The build's pretty simple, just runs a .NET build. The publish uses our SQL package utility and just does a normal publish that you'd be familiar with if you've used DACPack. The next thing I want to show is a workflow that we've set up to publish this. So the first thing, because we're using GitHub packages, we just want to set the permissions for the token that we're going to use. Then we want to say that we want to build this. We're going to download a SQL backup at the build time from one of our repos and bring that into our container. So at the moment, this is going to sit on the build agent, but you'll see just now how we're going to copy that in. Then we want to log into the container registry. We'll just use some variables that are available to us. That secrets GitHub token is a special token that's inserted, which represents the person that's running the pipeline, or that made the pipeline trigger. You can see our build uses a Docker file that's in a build folder, and then we push 2 tags for this package. The one is build specific, and the other one is a general dev tag. If we head over to the local SQL connection, you can see we've got this demo database. It doesn't have any data in at the moment, but just know that that demo database is the one that we've pulled from our backup and we've restored it. And then we've got a contacts table here this time, which has got a couple of columns in it, contact ID, first name, last name, and email address. Cool, so let's close this down quickly. And where do we want to go next? The next one we should show I think we just look at that build folder and show the artifacts that we're using at build time. So that Docker file, we start off by using a SQL 2019 latest image. Then we want to install PowerShell again. We want to get that SQL package into this image, and they want to copy some files off our build agent into our package, also into our image. And then lastly, we're going to run our entry script file. You can see it runs the init file, and at the same time, we kick off the SQL Server service. So those will run together. And yeah, we've got similar logic again, but this time using the SQL CMD to be able to execute that. And again, it's going to run in a loop. And when SQL comes up, this will actually run and complete. And then, yeah, we've got a command that does that restore database from that backup that we copied in. And then we're going to do a DB deploy for the DAC pack that got copied in as well as run this init SQL against that database that we've just deployed against our empty DB. And then here's that the actual source code that's powering this. So to just show how this works, we can, as a DB dev, we go add a new column called mobile number. And that's because this is a dev environment, we shouldn't have to go somewhere else to actually build this or publish it. No random command lines. So we're just going to say run a task. We're going to build this. So go ahead and build for us. And then obviously want to test our changes. So we'll just go and publish this as well to this local machine. And you'll see there that if you're familiar with the output from the SQL package, that the alter did run against this table. And if we run a select on this context table now, you can see that we do have an extra column there, and all the data for it is currently null. Cool, so let's go ahead and just commit this code quickly. We're just adding mobile support. And we'll go ahead and commit this. And then I'm going to push that up to GitHub. Cool, now that we've done that, if we go over back to our repo and go to actions, we see a new actions kicked off, one new workflow is kicked off. If we open that workflow, we see it's done the version update already. Busy doing the build currently. The build's done, downloading the file, it's done. It's busy building our container. And let's see, everything looks okay. Starting on the layers, we can jump across. So sort of doing a roundabout way of jumping to the package. If you go to packages from the org and jump to the specific package, you'll see at the top there, it does actually jump us back to show the sort of origin repo that this package came from. You can see here all the tags that sort of shows exactly how it's showed in the publish YAML, all the different versions, and then a dev tag, which we're using for everyone's dev environments. So we're just going to copy that Docker pull, and it's largely just for the image name, and we'll go back to our dev container earlier, or code space. But instead of us connecting, which takes a while, we'll just edit quickly inside the Docker compose file. So we'll go here for our DB instance, instead of using SQL 2019, actually we'll comment that out and we'll add a new attribute for image, set that to new dev one. And then we'll go and commit this quickly, just say using DB build. SQL check, yeah, that looks right. Okay, we'll commit that change quickly, and now we'll jump back over to the code hub, open a new code space, And then again, we'll just open up VS Code. Just because my brain doesn't quite like the idea of being in my browser and doing super productive things. If someone walks past, it mustn't look like I've got, well, they mustn't see YouTube open. That must be in a window that's hidden behind. If I click on the build code space, the info thing there, you can see the same status like when we did the rebuild before that you saw in the VS Code that was running in the background. You can see that same output here. And there it's gone and loaded up new code space for us. If we go to the Docker Compose, just to make sure this is that change that we've just made. And then I suppose to verify if this change took effect, we'll just quickly go to that SQL connection again. And we're going to take a look at what if that change for our mobile number has actually now been released into this sort of dev environment or dev container. You see I've got those other two, the DBs there as you would expect. And if I select on that specific products table, you see mobile number does exist there, and it comes through as you would expect from the changes that we made specifically now. Okay, that's all from me. I don't know if there's any questions. Sorry, it was a bit of a long one.
Cool, Gordon. We have a few, well, one or two. The first one comes from Yaku, and he asks, the new GitHub projects is amazing, and the modularity finally allows us to function in a way that works for us. Instead of conforming to what the tool dictates, I mean, do you know if this functionality will be coming to Asdo?
I'm just going to be honest and say no. Something like this will never come to Azure DevOps. We should move to GitHub.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Also from Yaku, what is the lifetime of the code spaces like? Do they expire after a certain period? And is the use of the code spaces free? Also, can you set a container with certain recommended extensions for people that want to contribute to your repo? Or is that solely linked to your own GitHub account and up to personal preference?
So those dev containers, as you saw it there, those are for that repo. So if you had to go and fork that repo, so I think I didn't mention all of those repos that are in that organization, in that demo org, they all are left open. So the only ones I end up cleaning up is the ones that I sort of start with that demo dash. But the rest of those will stay there, and you will be able to go and clone those. But yeah, if you do clone those on your side, if you do have access to code spaces, you can open that and it should just work as expected. If you don't, you should be able to, with Docker installed locally, you should just be able to run that dev container locally from your machine. And then for the lifetime of code spaces, that part of the question, yes, they do expire. I can't exactly remember the duration, but after a while that container will be shut down. And for the last part of that, it is currently free while it's because the service itself is currently in preview, if I'm not mistaken.
Cool, thank you. I'm just looking at if there's any more questions. Yes, we have one. Let me check that. Okay, from Ashley, he says, as a tester or dev, am I allowed to pull any base container images, or are there restrictions on them?
That would depend on your organization, but like the technology doesn't limit you in what you pull from where. Like if you have valid auth to get to somewhere, you should be able to pull that in.
Cool. I'm seeing if there's any more. Nothing has come through just yet. We may have to call the session if there's no more questions. I think they're highly engaged with all of the information that you've been sharing. So maybe you've actually done such a good job that they don't have any questions right now. Okay, so we'll call the Q&A session. Thank you, Gordon. I'll now hand over to Adrian to just say a few last words.
Thanks, Gordon, for the demo and guidance around improving the way we use the tools we have at our disposal. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. And thanks, Adrian. And thanks to all of you for tuning in to our Derivco Tech Thursday webinar. If you'd like to join us at future events or future events like these, keep an eye on your email and our socials for invites. Also, look out for a short questionnaire that will be popping in the Q&A tab now. We want you to share what you liked, what you didn't, and even suggestions for future topics and speakers. While on speakers, if you're from outside Derivco and would like to become a Derivcan, click on the Derivco talent link and have a look at the roles on offer. Who knows, you could be presenting our next Tech Thursday, and wouldn't that be rad? One last thing, if you'd like to rewatch the session, we'll be uploading it to our YouTube page by tomorrow. Just look out for the link on our socials. I'll leave it there. Take care and see you at the next one.